Hello, this is Angelia, and you are watching or listening to the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time, we were talking about stuff that went on back in the old days, such as the Inquisition, when people thought mental illness was evil and things of that nature. Thankfully, we've learned a little bit more. We're going to talk about some modern internal approaches now. The 18th century saw the beginning of the age of enlightenment, thanks goodness. The general move being toward more scientific ideas and practices. So, it kind of got away from the people who are mentally ill or evil and possessed and whatever else to, well, now we think there might be something else going on here. For instance, the revolutionary work of such people as Sir Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, and René Descartes in the fields of mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy became more widely accepted. So people are starting to realize, hey, yeah, there's something to this, And several discoveries in various branches of medicine led to the very popular theory that all disease was caused by organic pathology. That's just what they thought, because they were finding these physical reasons for everything. So they thought, hey, everything must have a physical reason. It was also finally recognized that the brain is central to all functioning, emotional and behavioral as well as physiological. So, they were starting to figure out, hey, something is going on up here that, has to do with everything. Early opponents to the external explanation of demonology asserted that abnormal behavior was a manifestation of mental disease. So there were some folks who said, I don't believe all these people are possessed of the devil. I think there's some problems going on up here. Now some of them could have been, we don't know. And I think there's people nowadays running around with this problem. Since this clearly agreed with the organic theory for all disease, the assumption that brain pathology in particular caused abnormal behavior seemed a logical extension. So again, they were learning about science, learning about, discovering things, and they said, oh, well, if this physical reason causes this, then this stands to reason that there's a physical reason why this person is mentally ill. The work of von Haller and Graysinger, and especially Kraepelin's classification schema, more or less cemented the belief in the disease models. So these early scientists working in, philosophy and mental health said, aha, we think there's some disease behind these behaviors. This set the stage for one of the most long-standing disputes in psychology, the conflict between the biogenic and psychogenic approaches. That is, between the relative roles of organic and psychological factors in the development of abnormal behavior. There's still a little tension between psychiatrists and psychologists now, because my son was seeing a psychiatrist to get his ADD medication, and then he said, don't take him to a psychologist. He said, we know it's a physical problem. All psychologist is going to do is, get in his head and mess around in the family deals, and, there's no use in that. Just keep him on his meds. So, let's see, both of these approaches are essentially internal. They both concentrate on changes occurring within the individual that produce unusual behavioral symptoms. If you've ever had a really high fever and people around you saying crazy things or, whatever, that sometimes physical problems can affect you mentally. But again, not every mental disturbance has a physical component. The view that was most popular at the very beginning of that move toward a more modern perspective was the biogenic view, meaning that they felt like there was a physical problem for everything. The biogenic view, the disease model. The disease model that finally displaced demonology as the primary explanation of behavioral deviance focused on internal biological malfunctions. While an illness may be started by an external source, such as a virus, it is nevertheless clear that the disease operates internally, so they knew that much at least. It was therefore believed that any abnormal behavior that developed was a result of changes in inner systems produced by the disease. So they thought there's something inside of these people that are making them like this. One of the clearest illustrations and supports of the disease model is the connection between syphilis and general paresis. The general paresis case. And so they thought, aha, we're on to something, we found it now. Syphilis is a very serious disease, usually transmitted through sexual intercourse. Its cause is a spiral-shaped microorganism, the spirochete Treponema pallidum, which can attack one or several different inner systems once it enters the body. And this is why you should always be having safe sex if, you're jumping around. This attack always follows a clear and certain course in 4 stages. The first 2 stages occur shortly after infection, and both have clear physiological symptoms. During the 3rd stage, the disease goes underground for as many as 10 to 30 years. When the final stage occurs, the system or systems attacked by the microorganism begin to deteriorate. And I forget who it was. One of those famous gangsters, had that, and that's how he died. One of the primary areas affected the central nervous system. Because neurological functioning is impaired, this form of the disease is now called neurosyphilis as well as general paresis. Because, once it gets to a certain point, there's no treating it, there's no helping it. You got problems. However, it was not known until the 19th century that syphilis and general paresis were the same disease. So, it wasn't known until the 1800s that this was the same disease happening here. In the past, general paresis referred to what was thought to be a psychological problem. Therefore, when it was finally recognized that the 2 diseases were the same, the simple elegance of the explanation reinforced the belief in the disease model. Because if one of these mental problems, when the brain was deteriorating, they started exhibiting this, well, if one of them was physically caused, then the rest of them probably were too, they reasoned. Unfortunately, belief in the disease model has not yet led to the discovery of any organic pathology behind the 2 major mental disturbances, schizophrenia and affective disorders. So there's probably not. They might have found it by now. Researchers have turned their attention to relatively similar biogenic explanations, specifically in genetics and biochemistry. And, a lot of people, that's a scary thing to them. But, like I said, I believe God invented science, and someday science might prove God exists. So I don't think there's anything wrong in this study of these things. These areas have yielded some interesting findings and seem more promising than the idea that a virus invades the body and produces mental illness. Because, now we know that's definitely really only in the case of syphilis is that, something. There are other physical problems like head injuries and what have you. But a lot of the time, the mental illness is not caused from something you caught. Nevertheless, the disease model has left a strong legacy. Mental illness, patient, mental hospital, these terms and others indicate its powerful influence. The biogenic view, genetics. All living things transmit specific hereditary information from one generation to the next. That's just a fact. The information ranges from the very general, such as animal, primate, human, to the very specific, such as eye and hair color, shape of the nose, and height. In this way, each species is sure to reproduce more of itself, with individual variations included to aid the evolutionary process. And that's why they talk about how mutts are actually more healthy and live to be longer and everything. The more your genetic diversity, the healthier you usually are. Now, there are situations where genetic diversity can cause problems, but when you start having all the same, and that's why different people, the different parts of the world, look the same. If through generations after generations you've only bred with people with black hair and brown eyes, that's what you're going to get. If you only bred with people with blue eyes and blonde hair, that's what you're going to get. So, this transmission of information takes place in a single cell at the moment of conception, when the entire genetic endowment for that person is set. The physical characteristics, the base behaviors such as crying and laughing, and the overall pattern of development throughout a rather predictable life cycle. Chromosomes, tiny rod-like structures in that first and every other human cell, contain the genetic code that controls the pattern of development. Each cell contains 46 chromosomes, joined into 23 pairs. There is only a single exception. Sperm and egg cells contain only half of the total, so that when they unite, the new cell, the first cell of a new person, will have the required total of 46, having obtained 23 chromosomes from each parent. The determination of which chromosomes the sperm and egg cells will supply is a random process. And I believe it should be. I don't believe people should be genetically modifying their babies unless it's a case of a really deadly disease that runs in the family, and they can remove that disease so that child can have a long and happy life. I don't believe you should be picking eye color, hair color, any kind of other things that go into being a person, because that's what makes them an individual. Now, saving a life, I think that's probably okay. That's what Jesus would do. But having designer babies, I think that is not kosher. I think that's wrong, because it's meant to be a random process. It's meant to be a surprise what your child looks like. That's my opinion. And this accounts for the variation in genetic endowments. Geneticists estimate that there are over 8 million possible combinations of chromosomes from the mating of a couple. So 8 million possible, combinations when you have a child with somebody. So you never know what you're going to get. It is therefore not very surprising that children of the same parents are often quite different in a number of ways. And I know for most people that's true. I've known people who had kids who very much look like each other. You would think they were like twins, triplets, or whatever. But most of us, like if you look at my kids, I got a kid with brown curly hair. I got a kid with who started out with blonde hair, but then his blonde hair fell out and he's got black hair now. And then another one who's got wavy brown hair. So, the different combinations came together from me and my husband and made what they made. We now know that each chromosome is made up of long molecules of deoxyribonucleic acid, or your DNA, which occur in interwoven strands called double helixes. I think we've all seen the models. Strung along each double helix, much like pearls on a necklace, are genes. These are the individual hereditary transmission units, and each contains specific information about traits, such as diverse human characteristics as eye color, body size, and blood type. So yes, sorry folks, body size is hereditary. After fertilization, The genes line up in pairs, one from each parent. Dominant and recessive traits. Certain genes are stronger than others, or dominant, while others are weaker or recessive. For example, if one parent has given a gene for blue eyes and the other has given one for brown eyes, their child will have brown eyes, because in the determination of eye color, brown is dominant over blue. But remember that this brown-eyed child has a recessive gene for blue eyes. Therefore, if it married another brown-eyed person with a recessive blue-eyed gene, they could produce a blue-eyed child. Random combinations can and do match these hidden traits. So, like I told my kids, we're so mixed up between my DNA heritage and my husband's. There's no telling what they're going to get. Don't be surprised if they have any questions. Take a DNA test, but it probably just going to be yours. Clearly, recessive genes make the hereditary process more complex than it might initially appear to be. What important behavioral characteristics are inherited? No answer to this question is generally accepted, and the question of whether abnormal behavior is transmitted from generation to generation has similarly clouded the answer. And like I said, the debate usually is nature, nurture. Some things you can inherit, and you are more prone to these things. But also the way you're raised, the way you are nurtured or not, also play into things. However, several specific types of behavioral deviance appear to have some hereditary component, the chief among these being schizophrenia, the affective psychoses, antisocial behavior, and the anxiety disorders. So, bad news for y'all. If the parents had one or more of these, then you're liable to too. Family studies. The traditional way of studying genetic factors has been to compare the incidence of abnormal behaviors in persons of varying blood relationships. For instance, the incidence of schizophrenia in the general population is 1%, a figure that stays more or less the same for different socioeconomic and geographical groups. However, it is now reasonably well established that children of schizophrenic parents are 15 times more likely to develop schizophrenia than are children of non-schizophrenic parents. So that's bad news for you if you had a schizophrenic parent. Similar findings have been reported for other disorders. So, if mom or dad had mental health issues, unfortunately, you can inherit those. Some of them anyway. Again, some of them are things that happen to you, like PTSD. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program. And that's what this is, an educational program. It's not designed to diagnose or treat any mental illness. And if anything I said triggered you or seems to be a problem in your life, then by all means go talk to your mental health professional. But let's share it so we can get around the world. And help as many people as we can. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. The link to that is in my posts. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.